right, guys, with Selection Sunday coming up next week, NCAA tournament coming up soon. We know most teams are a lock to get in the NCAA tournament, but what about the teams that aren't exactly locks, but they could get in, like as an at-large? Uh, we have some teams that we want to talk about here. Some teams that could win their conference tournaments. I mean, so that'd be a moot point. But for the topic of this conversation, we're just going to presume that all don't. First, we have the Auburn Tigers. Just Evan, give you quick thoughts, and then I'll give some stats about them.
Yeah, I
Do you
am
think they get
not.
in?
Yeah, I am not huge on Auburn right now, and of course there's still time. But you got 7-10 in SEC play, so a losing record there. I just like the resume doesn't strike me as huge. They did have a 1 point loss, I believe, to Houston earlier in the season. That's sort of big. But literally every other big game, I believe they played three other big games in November and December, just absolutely trounced. SEC play, of course, like I said, they still have a losing record. They did get a nice win versus Florida, I believe, who was ranked in like the teens at that time. But other than that, not impressed with their resume. SEC status might carry them a little bit over, especially if they get hot, do a little well in the tournament. But right now, I'm not hot on Auburn. I don't think they've been impressive at all. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I personally don't think that Auburn should get in the NCAA tournament right now, as of right now. But I'll go over some things about them. So they've had a couple of nice wins. They've beaten Arkansas and they've won at Kentucky, but they've also lost to Ole Miss at home, which was a devastating loss. Quad three, which on Selection Sunday is going to be one of the things that could keep them out of the tournament. They've won four quad one games this year. They're 40 in the net, 11th offensively, and 116th defensive rating in the country, which I don't think is outstanding. Offense might get them in there, but I do not know. They actually let a game back in January. I believe it was slip away at Georgia. Um, a game that went to overtime. They were winning late, let that slip away. So that's a huge missed opportunity. We know what Georgia is now. So that was a huge missed opportunity there. They have Alabama coming up tomorrow, and then the SEC tournament in Nashville. So we'll see how that turns out for Auburn. Ohio State. Evan, just again, quick thoughts, really quick, and then I'll run into some numbers.
I like Ohio State. I like their resume. They're 11-8 in Big Ten play. I believe Big Ten is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, schedules to play in and year out. So 11-8 is pretty solid. They've played some pretty decent games. They only had a 1 point loss to UNC. They did lose, but that's impressive on itself. They just had a big home win against Wisconsin. I believe they beat them by like 16, 17 points when Wisconsin was ranked 24. So some momentum. They're hanging tough in the Big 10 schedule. 11-8. I like them. I think they're doing pretty well.
So yeah, Ohio State right now is 19-11, like Evan mentioned, 11-8 in a Big Ten play. They have a win over Purdue at home, which I thought was, huge. The problem I have right now is they only have two quad one wins, which was at home against Purdue and at Northwestern, who's sitting at 69th in the net right now. At 19th offensively, 54th defensive rating in the country. They're currently 32 in the net. For me right now, I would put the Buckeyes in though. So there's that. That they Ohio State hosts Indiana coming up, I believe tomorrow. The Big Ten plays some games on Sunday, and then the Big Ten tournament coming up in Indianapolis, I believe it is. TCU. Now this one, I think we'll agree on this one. I don't see how we won't, but I'll just let Evan explain what he thinks first.
Well, we'll see. I'm actually a little bit curious about that. I decently like TCU. I think they're 10-7 in Big 12 play. They've had three different top 10 wins. So I'm thinking Jordan agrees with me on this, but we'll see. They've beaten Florida, they've beaten Iowa State, and they've beaten Texas Tech, all top 10 wins. I believe Iowa State was even the 5 seed when they beat them. So very impressive. 10-7 in the Big 12. Okay, you could say that's a little mediocre, but I think that's plenty enough to make the tournament. We'll hear what Jordan says on the numbers, but I think TCU, as long as they don't choke us in.
I definitely agree with that. I think TCU has done more than enough to solidify their mark as one of the 64 best teams in the country. Technically 68, but I don't think at this point they would play in the first four. They've beaten, the Gators, Iowa State, Texas Tech this season. They're 42 in the net, five quad one wins. 19th in the nation defensively, which I think is really impressive, especially in the Big 12, where you have, Arizona, Kansas, Houston, all those teams. They are 97th offensively, though, which worries me a little bit. They did have a bad loss, a couple bad losses at home against Notre Dame and the University of New Orleans back in, I believe it was November. So that worries me a little bit, but we've seen TCU improve. They have Cincinnati to close out the regular season, I believe, tomorrow, and then they play in the Big 12 tournament in Fort Worth, I believe it is. San Diego State. We'll let Evan. Should the Aztecs be in
So
right
I've
now?
yeah, I've had some yes or no's. This one I'm iffy on. I'm iffy on San Diego State. They play in a solid conference. The Mountain West, and the record in is pretty good. I don't exactly remember the record. But when they have played big opponents, a little bit of pause. I know this was earlier in the season, but when they played Michigan, just mauled by 40 points. When they played Arizona, mauled by 20 something points. Those were their biggest competition. Again, the Mountain West is decent, but it's not crazy good. So they've had a good record, but to me, and Mitt Jordan will read the numbers. I don't know what they are on like the quad wins and stuff like that. To me, they may get bit because of their resume. I think they're a solid team, but when they have played the big dogs, they got trounced, and they don't really have much else to show for it other than a decent record in the Mountain West. So I'm a little iffy on San Diego State. I could see it either way.
So the Aztecs right now are 19 and 10 overall, 13 and 6 in the Mountain West. They have a win at Utah State, which is really impressive. I think that's their only home loss this year. The Aggies, San Diego State currently only has two quad one wins right now. That's in part of the conference they play in, but like Evan mentioned, the one big opportunity that stands out was Michigan, and they got shellacked by the Wolverines. San Diego State is currently 46th in the net, 20th defensively nationally, which is really impressive. I value defense. I don't know how Evan feels about that, but they are 92nd offensively in the country. But for me right now, I would say San Diego State, I'd put them in. They close the season with UNLV. I believe that's actually tonight as we are recording this. And then they play the Mountain West tournament in Las Vegas, I believe it's in.
And just really quick, I will say if you are as good as 20th in the nation as defense, I would definitely value that. That's really good. Yeah.
All right, Santa Clara. I don't know how much Evan knows about this team. They play in the West Coast Conference, but well, let's see what his thoughts are.
Don't really know a ton, but it was interesting to see where they are. They're third in the West Coast Conference. Of course, you've got St. Mary and Gonzaga, who are just always really good, but they're 15 and 3 in conference play. That's amazing. I'm iffy on them though, if they're gonna make it or not, just because the strength of schedule sort of sucks outside of that. They to me, they look like a top 68 team. If you're asking me who are the best 68 in the country, I would say Santa Clara is one of them, but they just don't have a ton on their resume. So that might, same as San Diego State, that might bite them a little bit. They've each time they played Gonzaga this year, they did lose, but they played them very respectable. They did beat Minnesota. Minnesota is of course not amazing, but they are a Big Ten team, so a little bit, but it will be interesting to see where they fall. But 15 and 3 is pretty impressive for a conference record, I'd say.
Okay, so Santa Clara, I would put in right now. We'll, see how their tournament run goes. The West Coast Conference is actually playing their conference tournament this week while everyone else is finishing up. Well, pretty much everyone else, and then they'll play their conference championship next week. It's a weird schedule dynamic. But Santa Clara only has one quad one win, which is, in part to the conference they play in. No offense to any teams in those conference, any teams in that conference, but it's just not a big strength of schedule. They're currently 41 in the net, though, 26th offensively and 65th defensively in the country. The offense stands out to me. I would not think that Santa Clara will be that high nationally. Like I said, they're in the conference tournament right now. They're the 3 seed in it. Their opponents yet to be determined, so we'll see how that finishes up. Cal, Evan, thoughts?
A nut third straight iffy. I could see it either way. They do have a winning record in the ACC. They are 9 and 8, I believe, in in conference, so that is pretty solid. Of course, that's a solid basketball conference. They do have some big wins. They beat North Carolina. They went on the road and beat Miami. I do like both of those wins, but just a little bit iffy because they are about 500. They've had a couple ugly losses, and it's going to largely depend on how they do, of course, in their last game and going forward in the tournament. But a little bit iffy. There's a resume there, but 9-8 is sort of mediocre. So we'll see where they land. Yeah.
I personally would not put Cal in right now. And I know that some people are thinking, well, they're 21-9 overall, 9-8 in the ACC, which, historically has been a pretty good basketball conference. They have wins against Miami, North Carolina, like Evan mentioned, but they're 64th on the net right now, 70th in the Ken Palm rankings, which is a big factor in Selection Sunday. They're 101st in the nation offensively and 46th defensively. So they're right on the border as of right now. Obviously, a run in the ACC tournament would be helpful for their chances. But if they're one and done, I honestly do not think they make it. Um, Cal finishes up with Wake Forest tomorrow and then plays in the ACC tournament in Charlotte. All right, so we got the Indiana Hoosiers, and this one is interesting. Evan, I'll just let you give your thoughts first.
We were very decisive early on. That we're going to make it a fourth straight iffy. I am iffy on Indiana. They are 9-10. Again, I view the Big Ten as a little bit better than most conferences. So 9-10 is about like a 9-8 for whoever's case, like Cal, for example, like we just talked about. So they're 9-10, so technically a losing record, but in the Big Ten, so they're right in the thick of things. They do have a win versus Purdue. That is pretty big. Although me and Jordan have talked about this in private. I don't know how good that Purdue team is to me. They look very small. They don't look like they can dominate in the perimeter. But they did beat Purdue. That's an impressive win for Indiana. But again, same thing. Indiana, it's large. They're right on the bubble. It's going to depend on what they do going forward, especially if they could get a win versus Ohio State and then move into the tournament and get a win or two. That would help tremendously. I'm iffy on Indiana. I would put someone in like Ohio State over them all day at the moment, but they still have a chance to prove themselves. So a little bit iffy on them.
So speaking about Indiana, 18-12 overall, 9-10 in the Big Ten. They did beat Purdue, and they have a road win at UCLA, who, by the way, has beaten three top 10 teams this year, including aforementioned Purdue. But that's a different discussion. They currently have two quad one wins. They're 37th in the net, 37th offensively, and 57th defensively in the country. Right now, I'm iffy on Indiana. I'm going to agree with Evan here. There are some numbers that tell me yes to put them in, but I just don't know. I've watched a few Indiana games this year, and they have not looked impressive to me. I know a few games is not the entire season, but I'm just being honest here. They finish up in Columbus on, I believe, Sunday, and then play on the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. Texas A&M, that's an interesting one. Evan, what do you think?
I actually do not have much for Texas A&M, so I will yield this one to you. But yeah, I'm just going to yield this one to you. Yep.
Okay, so Texas A&M right now is 20-10 and 10-7 in the SEC. If you asked me this question at the end of January, I would have looked at you crazy and would have said, "Why is this even a question?" Of course, Texas A&M's in. However, they've slipped a little bit in conference play. They're 10-7, like I mentioned, but they do have wins over Kentucky and on the road at Georgia. So that's very impressive. They have five quad one wins. I don't think I really need to say a lot more. I would put them in. They finish up with LSU tomorrow in Baton Rouge and play in the SEC tournament in Nashville. The Cincinnati Bearcats out of the Big 12. Evan?
Okay, so the only one I still that I have the knowledge behind is Texas to win. So I will yield any of the other ones to you, but and then we'll finish up on my thoughts on Texas. But yeah.
All right, so Cincinnati is 17-13 and 9-8 in the Big 12. If you had asked me this question, a month ago, I would say no way Cincinnati's in, but they've been on a bit of a hot streak. I believe they've won five out of their past six games. They have wins over Iowa State and on the road at Kansas, which has certainly helped their case. Iowa State is currently 10th in the net, and Kansas is currently 19th. Cincinnati has three quad one wins. they're 121st offensively in the country, which concerns me, but they are 10th defensively in the country. That is outstanding. Especially like I said, you're playing the Big 12 with, Kansas, Iowa State, Arizona, those teams in there, Houston. So that's really impressive. I'm iffy on Cincinnati. I don't really know right now. I would probably put them in, but time will tell. They end the season with TCU on the road tomorrow and then playing the Big 12 tournament in Fort Worth. And finally, we're going to be talking about the Clemson Tigers. Um, I don't think this is going to be much of a discussion, but let's just see. Evan,
Well, Clemson, I'll give my thoughts on Texas too because I thought you wanted to talk about that one, but maybe not. But we'll do Clemson first. Clemson, I've watched a little bit about that one. They played good. They did just get a nice win over Louisville, right? Jordan? Yeah,
correct.
that was pretty good. And I don't love them. They laid an absolute stinker in the tournament last year, but that's a big win versus Louisville. And as long as they don't collapse, I think they're probably going to be right there. So I would say maybe. And let me just give my thoughts on Texas really quick. Texas, I would say no to. So maybe that's why Jordan didn't even include it. 9-8 in the SEC, which is okay, decent, right? But and they did get a win over Alabama, so that means something. But to me, they're just it's pretty mediocre. The resume is pretty mediocre. So I would affirmatively leave Texas out unless they went on a run or something.
Okay, so really quick, just let me say I would emphatically put Clemson in. The numbers are absolutely incredible. The stats are absolutely incredible. Six quad one wins. They're 17th in the country defensively. They have a win over Louisville, like Evan mentioned. They also beat Georgia back in the non-conference. Yes, I value that as not a gigantic win, but a big win. Neutral floor, you beat an SEC team. Great job. I mean, not great job, like sarcastically, but they have Georgia Tech left, and then they go play the ACC tournament in Charlotte. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but this is going to be interesting. We have, a couple. Actually, we have like four teams on here that play each other tomorrow or Sunday, which I find interesting. I don't know about you, Evan.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be good, especially that Indiana Ohio State matchup. I'm probably gonna tune into that one, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Hopefully, the decision makers look at just actually what's going on and not just SEC, Big Ten. We're gonna put them in. Like, pick the best team. If those are the best teams, then put them in. Of course, it doesn't matter if they're in the SEC or whatever, but. Pick the best teams, please. That's my promise. But yeah, tomorrow's gonna be a good day of college basketball.
Just a question here. Do you think the loser of that Indiana Ohio State game is out for sure?
If it's
Well, I
Indiana
think
for sure, if it's
because
Ohio, yeah, if it's Indiana for sure, I think 9-11 going into conference play, unless they went on a crazy run. Ohio State, no. I think Ohio State, no. Indiana, they would probably be in big trouble. Yeah.
of course, I can't say definitely because we still have the conference tournament to play. And of course, if you win your conference tournament, then you automatically get a spot in the big dance. So that would make that a moot point.